OTP. I'm Amie Wells, and I'm joined by Titan senior writer-editor Jim Wyatt. Jim, I've brought you outside today, not just because it's about 100 degrees in Nashville, and that felt like kind of a mean trick, but because training camp is just around the corner, and this felt like the right place to really get in the mood, really feel the vibe of training camp. But the heat is also a real thing.
Yes, and if we really want to feel the vibe, we can take it out to the 50. Be right out in the middle of the sun. Mm-hmm. You want to do that?
No, I sure don't. I'm not there yet. And I don't think anybody's really there yet. As you can see behind us, they're mowing the fields. They're getting everything ready. There's construction happening around St. Thomas Sports Park, putting up the tents and the bleachers and all of the things that you see every year at training camp. But Jim, can you believe we're really here?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Once they finish mini camp and you got the countdown to training camp, it always flies by. But yeah, you're right. Once you see the tents going up, once you see the field being painted, the numbers going in, it's getting close. More people in the building now than there have been the last couple of weeks. And we'll be out here on the field next week.
We haven't seen a training camp that is this hot. I looked at the forecast right before I came down here, and temperatures in Nashville are supposed to be in the mid to upper 90s, and that's not heat index, that's like air temperature.
Right.
How do you think that's going to impact the way the Titans are able to work? Because it really is, at some points, a safety concern.
Yeah, and we'll find out pretty quickly who's in great shape and who's been working. I do think because of the schedule, a lot of 8 o'clock practices, we're going to really get going and be done by the time the real heat gets out here. I don't think it'll be that much of a concern. I think most days it is an 8 to 10, 15 practice, and then obviously interviews. Brian Callahan will be talking while people are eating their Raisin Bran. I think his press conference starts at maybe 7:15 in the morning a lot of those days. So they're going to get going early. They're going to get the day started. I think heat obviously will be an issue for some guys. They have to make sure they hydrate. But I think guys will manage, and it'll be good for them. I think the real heat will come when we're in Atlanta and in Tampa, because I think those practices a little bit later in the day, and they know heat down there as well.
Yeah, it's hot everywhere, especially in the South. As we're getting ready for training camp and really building up to it, you mentioned it. You can almost feel it in the building that things are about to get started. Is there anything different about maybe the vibe or what you're feeling around the building this year than in previous years?
Yeah, I think the way Brian Callahan approached the offseason, more competition, more togetherness, trying to get players to know each other better, I think it's been great. I think the energy throughout the offseason was good, from the practice sessions to what we saw at the end of practice, when they would have competitive periods where guys would work against one another in groups as he divided up the team. So I think the energy's been really good for this team, and I think Denard Wilson being in year 2 and Nick Holtz being in year 2, and obviously changes on special teams. John Fossil, the way he's kind of conducted things with the special teams unit, I think there's more confidence, more togetherness, and feels like this team is going to be in better position as we start camp.
I had the opportunity to talk to Brian Callahan on the OTP about competition and where that idea came from to really foster a sense of competition in everything they do. And he talked about how competition and overcoming adversity together really breeds the culture of your team. And so he was very intentional about doing that during the off-season program. What's interesting now is that training camp is inherently competitive, because this is where jobs are won and lost. How do you think that's going to carry over where, yes, it's competition, yes, we're all going up against each other all the time, but we're also trying to create a team?
Yeah, and certainly, training camp does bring out the energy and brings out the competition more than any other time, because you're putting the pads on for the first times and jobs are at stake. So, I know they always preach about, don't cross the line, don't get into fights. But sometimes when you're in practice and your job's on the line, and the guy against you is bothering you, I guess, you're tired of working with them days in a row, that's when you'll see some scraps happen. But I think they want them to keep it in line, support one another. Like you said, we're all a team trying to work together, but nothing like putting on the pads and the heat that will bring out the best in guys.
Shameless plug, if you haven't listened to that OTP with Brian Callahan, he talked a lot about the genesis of the whole idea of competition and some of the other coaches he was inspired by. Be sure to check it out. It was posted just a couple weeks ago, so you're not behind yet. Go check out the OTP with Brian Callahan. This summer, SeatGeek has your ticket to the best live concerts in Nashville at Nissan Stadium. SeatGeek has the best seat, your seat, for an unforgettable summer. From rock royalty to rap superstars, R&B to country, find it all on SeatGeek, the official ticketing partner of Nissan Stadium. Little Caesars is the official pizza partner of your Tennessee Titans. Download the Little Caesars app and get your favorites delivered today. Delivery fees apply. Now, back to the OTP. All right, let's talk about some of the position groups that are going to be competing, because there's a lot to watch in this training camp. I guess the place we should start are just position groups that are kind of still up in the air in terms of open spots that are really up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is inside linebacker. You know, Cody Barton is going to be a starter. I think he's been really good this offseason. Who starts next to him? James Williams, Cedric Gray, Otis Reese. I think that's a big one. I think Reese, I think it's between Williams and Gray. I think throughout the offseason, I'd say probably Gray has the lead going into camp, but I say Williams has the lead going into camp, but Gray has a chance to certainly win. And that's what competition and that's what training camp's all about. That's one of them. A lot of other ones are, who's going to be the third tight end? Who's going to be the 9th and 10th offensive lineman? How are things going to shape out in the secondary, and how are guys going to be able to stay healthy? I think what happens at the receiver position, I know we'll probably get into that as well. A lot will hinge on how the young rookies do. So I would say probably going into camp, if you've got a 53-man roster, I think probably, GM, head coach have a pretty good idea on 50 guys. And so you've got 3 guys battling for spots, and they'll have to prove they can help on special teams and prove that they're better than maybe a fringe guy at another position group.
Well, let's talk about those receivers a little bit, because there's 13 in that room right now. That's a pretty big number. What do guys have to do to really separate themselves from the group? We know Calvin Ridley's going to be a starter, but behind him, there's a lot of configurations of these guys and ways that it could shake out. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I think the only thing for sure going into camp is that Calvin Ridley's the one, and expect him to be good. After that, I mean, you look at Van Jefferson, you look at Tyler Lockett, you figure those guys, because of their experience, would fall in line at being the 2 and the 3, but I don't know that it necessarily has to shake out that way. I think that's where Chimere Dike and Alec Eilman are, depending on how they do, they could change the pecking order in that group. If one of those guys is really good and they feel like they can count on those guys early, maybe they move up and are guys that they think they can regularly count on to be on the field as a 2 or 3. So maybe one of the veterans slides back a little bit. We haven't seen a lot of Tyler Lockett this offseason because he was dealing with an injury and had some other stuff going on. He had his first child. So I'm anxious to see what he looks like when camp starts. I think the room certainly I think he's probably been impressed by what is around him, so he knows he's going to have to get after it. After that, I mean, I think Bryce Oliver, because of what he can do on special teams, probably has a good shot to make it. So that's 6, all the guys I've mentioned. I think there's potential this team keeps 7. So then, who's the 7th? Xavier Restrepo has been really good this offseason. But you got Traylon Burks, obviously, and Jaquan Jackson and Mason Kinsey, a lot of other guys that are going to be battling out. And so curious to see how that plays out. And health is going to have something to do with it, too, because guys get hurt, miss practice time. Just don't know that. Did I even mention Traylon Burks?
Yeah, sort of.
So Traylon, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of him this offseason. He comes back from his ACL. So does he have one last surge in him to try to say, hey, I'm worth keeping around? And we'll find that out.
The numbers are so interesting, too, because, so if the Titans end up keeping 7 wide receivers, how does that impact some of these other groups and the numbers they're able to keep? And one of those groups is the offensive line that's seen a lot of change, a lot of kind of reshuffling of people. There's new faces in there. But that's another group where you want to have some depth. But who is that going to be, and how are those numbers going to work?
Yeah, and I think the biggest one for me starting off is on the offensive line, especially is what is Lloyd Cushenberry ready for camp? Is he, how much, if he's not ready, when does he join the team? How much is he able to do? What Dan Moore looks like with the pads on at left tackle, how J.C. Latham, adjusts with the pads on playing right tackle. They had a great offseason, but as you mentioned, who's behind him? Corey Levin got a lot of work at center. I think he's in, good shape to be a backup there. Hance, obviously a swing guy who can play a number of spots. Ojokwu, the team likes him. I think he's versatile enough where he can play some. So that's 8. So then you're battling for 9 and 10, and a lot of guys in that group. Curious to see how it plays out. Rupchich is somebody who's been valuable, can play a number of different spots, and Mustafa is new, and so curious to see how some of these play out. And again, health is going to determine a lot.
Yep, there's a lot to watch for sure. While we're talking about the offense, we've made it, over 10 minutes, and we haven't mentioned the quarterbacks yet. So this feels like an appropriate time to bring up the quarterback of it all. It seems as though all indicators point to Cam Ward being the expected number 1 quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. With that in mind, what does a successful training camp look like for Cam Ward when it seems like you already know what the expectation is when camp is over?
Yeah, I think just him being more comfortable, not making the same mistake twice, not turning the ball over, getting on the same page with his receivers. Yeah, at this point, Cam is expected to be the starter. I think based on what he's done, based on where they picked him, based on his overall ability, I think he's the best quarterback on this team. And now he's just got to go out and build momentum during the course of camp. And again, he's got to stay healthy too. But like everything I've seen from Cam, so far, from his competitiveness to his work ethic to his no-nonsense approach to wanting to be out here every day, and if not here, in the building early in the morning and working during the off season, I think they just don't want to have any setbacks from him and just want to see his growth just continue to go on an upward trek.
So knowing that is all but secure, what then does that mean for Will Levis? What does this training camp really mean for him as he continues his growth as a quarterback in this league?
Yeah, I think Will has done everything right too. It's a tough spot for Will because this time last year, everybody was talking about him being the starter and what he has to do to be ready for the season. And now he knows that why Cam Ward was brought in here. And I think Will's handled it well. He went to California, worked with Jordan Palmer. I think he improved his technique, improved his accuracy. I think on the field, I think he's been good this offseason. But I think he knows that his path is as the team's number 2 quarterback. So he needs to play well. He needs to solidify that. With all that said, I know other teams are going to be watching the Titans this offseason when Will Levis is playing. They're going to be, having joint practices against the Buccaneers and the Falcons, and it's not going to surprise me if other teams, depending on what happens across the league, start making calls to Mike Berganzi and Chad Brinker and inquire about Will Levis. So, I think if you get an offer you can't refuse, you gotta consider that as well. So Will's playing for his fate on this year's on this team. God forbid something happens to Cam Ward. He's got to put himself into a position where he can be the star if it has to be. And also, we can't ignore the fact that that things happen in this league that will surprise you sometimes. And I'm not going to be surprised if teams at least are inquiring about him as the season approaches.
And there's 2 other guys in that room, Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle, both added during free agency. What can they do to insert themselves into this conversation and become people who are actually thought of as guys who could be in that number 2 spot?
Yeah, I think Brandon Allen, between those 2, I think Brandon Allen's the guy who would, if let's say Will Levis is not here, I think Brandon Allen is the number 2. And, Brian Callahan has worked with him in the past. I think he likes his makeup, likes his ability, thinks he's capable of being a solid number 2. who gives you the better chance to win games. If let's say Cam's out for an extended period of time, that's certainly something you have to consider. I think, but I think Brandon Allen, he just needs to, kind of like Will, needs to make good decisions. He can't turn the ball over. He's got to take advantage of all of his reps. Boyle probably reps will be a little bit more limited in camp, I would think, but certainly has opportunity himself to stay in the conversation.
Let's take a minute to talk about you, Jim Wyatt, because as the quarterbacks are working throughout training camp, you chart every single throw that happens on these fields during camp. How exhausting is that for you? There are so many footballs thrown during training camp.
Yeah, so you have to kind of stay locked in. Certainly you can, as you know, you can get distracted out here and get in conversations, and so I try to just stay locked in and make sure I'm not missing a throw. I'm trying to keep track of who's throwing it, who's catching it on every play. And then if you probably see my wall in the office, I've got everything taped up there that shows a cumulative total throughout camp, not only for the quarterbacks, but for the receivers. If there are any interceptions, I keep track of the kicking stats, because it kind of helps me looking back to see how guys do. Obviously, guys are going to have their ups and downs, but it gives me a good idea of maybe what the complete body of work looks like when it's all said and done. So it is a lot of work, but certainly gives me something to write about. And on a day, if I'm watching I think the day Cam Ward was 21 out of 22 during the off season and completed maybe 19, 20 passes in a row. If I'm not keeping track of that, I'm thinking he had a good day, but by keeping track, I know how good of a day he had. So it's certainly a lot of work, but it keeps me locked into practices even more.
How many pencils are you burning through during training camp?
Some pencils, yeah. Burning through. I've had to buy another box this off season. Get ready.
Gosh, reload the box, Jim. It is. I mean, with the amount of things that are happening throughout the course of a training camp practice, whether it be on the field, different position groups going all at different times, different sections of this team working out simultaneously, and just like fans, and there's commotion and there's music, and then there's every media member who covers this team, and they're all very chatty because we haven't seen each other in a while. And so there's a lot going on. So I've always been very impressed by Jim Wyatt's stats throughout training camp, because it is an impressive feat that you are able to accomplish.
Well, I appreciate that.
Hey Titans fans, with a Kroger Boost membership, you'll score big with double fuel points, free delivery, and lots more. Go to Kroger.com/boost for details. Kroger, the official grocer of the Tennessee Titans. Tighten up. Home is the forefront of all we do. It's why we're so committed to caring for the places and spaces in which we work and live. Ashley, the official furniture provider of the Tennessee Titans. Now, back to the OTP. All right, let's talk about this rookie class just a little bit. It's safe to say, I think, that this rookie class is going into training camp with some pretty high expectations. Do you get that feeling as well?
I do. Starting with the quarterback, obviously. When you got a number one overall pick leading the way, certainly that puts a lot of emphasis on that class. But it's not just Cam. Like Femi Oladejo has a chance to really kind of catch some eyes this offseason. Big expectations out of him. I think they expect him to be a guy that's on the field from the very start in week one, and he'll have to prove that he's ready in camp. We kind of touched on the receivers, but the rookie receivers, including Restrepo, bring a lot of attention to this class, and those guys have a chance, especially DK and Ayoman, have a chance to really make a big impact for this team early. Gunnar Helm, we haven't touched on him yet, but he's another guy that I'm curious to see when the pads come on, just how he is able to perform and how he's able to kind of hold up day after day after day. So, and I expect him to be able to. So I think there's a really good rookie class, a group that has a chance to have a lot of guys on the field early this fall.
After watching everybody work throughout rookie mini camp, OTAs, mandatory mini camp, who in that draft class are you most excited to watch make the transition from the off-season program to training camp?
Yeah, is that, if I say Cam, is it cheating? Obviously,
it's totally cheating, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's got to be Cam. I mean, I think he I thought he had a great offseason. I thought everything I saw from him was good. Yeah, he turned the ball over a handful of times. But I think because it's him taking chances, whether it's in a red zone period or him getting on the same page with his receivers. So now how does he take what he learned from the offseason into training camp and build on that? And in a large part, in a big way, I should say, the success of this team is going to hinge on how Cam is, especially how he is early. So I think all eyes will be on him. Once again, if I have to pick a 1B, I think it would probably be Femi, just because, again, he's making the transition to a different position. He's still adjusting to that after doing that in college. He's looked like he had the pads on out here this offseason because of his size and stature, even though he hasn't. So seeing him in shoulder pads and seeing him ready to get after it against some of these offensive linemen when they're padded up, curious to see how he does.
Femi's the one that I was going to say because of that position change. And I mean, that's saying something because I always cheat when given the opportunity. So I'm glad you did it for me. We haven't talked a ton about the defense, and partially that's because we haven't seen him with pads on yet. And so there's only so much you can do and only so much you can really understand until this team puts pads on. What are you most looking forward to, or what question marks do you maybe still have about this defense that you're hoping will be answered once they get pads on?
Yeah, and part of it is who wins the job next to Barton. That's the biggest competition, I think, on the team. Another big part for me is just how things shake out at cornerback. L'Jarius Sneed and what he's able to do in camp, whether he's able to build some momentum going into the off season. That's a big one. Build the momentum. L'Jarius didn't do much during the offseason. We saw him out here from time to time. He spent most of the time inside and working his way back. Does he start on PUP? If he practices, how much do they manage him? Because he's going to control the pecking order in that group. I mean, I think Sneed, obviously, and McCreary and Jarvis Brownlee, this team's top three corners. Darrell Baker, a good player. Gabe Judy Lally, I think, has made some plays. They've got some other guys in that cornerback group that are going to be worth keeping an eye on. But it all hinges on what Sneed's able to do and how much he's able to be on the field. So that how things shape out at corners. One is there seems like the team's a little thin on the defensive line. You obviously like Devondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons and Sebastian Joseph Day, but after that, I mean, I think they're still looking for guys to kind of step up and play there. So that's something I'm watching. Safety, feel good about Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods, but Kevin Winston's another guy that we have seen out here maybe on the side field working. Is he able to work his way into the mix to get himself ready for the season? That's something else I'm looking for out of the defense.
In summary, Jim Wyatt is watching the front, the middle, and the back of the defense.
Tried to touch all bases.
All of the parts.
Yes. But I did not mention, I didn't touch on edge much other than Femi.
You didn't, that's true.
So Draymond Jones, I mean, he's another guy that, Draymond and Arden Key, that way I'm trying to mention everybody on the defense.
I love
that
it.
Way, that way I don't leave anybody out. But how those guys do, how that shakes out. Again, I expect Femi to be on the field a lot from the start, and I expect Draymond Jones to be on the field a lot from the start. So Arden is going to be probably more of a situational pass rusher, but the success he has will determine just how much he's on the field too.
If there's anyone you don't want to leave out, it's Arden
Yes,
Key, because
yes.
he'll let you know.
And thought he had a good offseason. I know coaches praised him for just taking Femi under his wing and kind of being a good leader for that group.
Absolutely. Who's a player that fans maybe aren't talking about that you think they should be?
I think Tyjae Spears, maybe. I haven't mentioned his name yet just because he's going to have a bigger role this year as long as he can stay healthy. Tony Pollard obviously was the workhorse last year in large part because he had to be, because Tyjae was dealing with some injuries, and I think toward the end of the season he was able to kind of get into a little bit of a groove and show his potential. So I think Tyjae Spears is somebody who could generate some buzz just because I thought he looked really good, looked fast this offseason, and expect him to be very active in camp.
What's one storyline that you, Jim Wyatt, are excited about watching develop throughout camp?
I think probably Tavondre Sweat and just how he shows up here and what he's able to do in camp. There's no question that he is very talented, and when he is playing at a high level, he can be great. And we saw glimpses of that last year, but we didn't see it consistently. And I think a lot's going to hinge on just what he's able to do in camp. And hope is that he shows up in great shape, is able to practice all the way through. They're able to build him up toward the season, and he can be a dominant force this fall. But a lot of that's up to him.
Tavondre Sweat is a veteran player that I'm really excited about what he could be able to do in 2025. Do you have a player like that you're excited about watching what they do in 2025 and maybe how they elevate their game?
Yeah, I think Calvin Ridley, and that's not to say he didn't have a good year last year. He caught, I think he had 1,079 receiving yards, but just him being the leader of that group now, I think he seemed like he's re-energized with Cam Ward here. He knows he's the leader of this group now, and some young guys around him. So I think Calvin Ridley is a guy has potential to make more explosive plays and to be playmaker week in and week out. There were games last year where Calvin didn't get involved in the first half, and certainly he expressed some frustration because of that. I think they need to make sure they have him in the game plan, making plays, because that opens up things for everybody.
Jimmy, what's your favorite thing about training camp?
I think just the competition and just the countdown to the season. I mean, I like watching the off-season work, but there's going to be a pause there before training camp starts. Now, every day when practice ends, you're one day closer to preseason games and one day closer to the season. So I look forward to camp just to see how some of these battles shake out and to see who can stay healthy and to see how this team comes together as we approach week 1 in Denver. And you're going to see a lot of optimism around the league, probably here. All 32 teams, certainly in camp, feel good about themselves. But I think how things go, how players perform, how Cam does specifically, that makes me excited about camp this year.
That was a really good answer, Jim. Good job. My favorite thing is the fights. That's less good.
Yes.
Training camp begins here at Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park on July 23rd. That is the first official practice of training camp. Now, if you want to know when the open practices are, TennesseeTitans.com is where you can go to get all of that information. I think some of them are sold out, so head on over there and check all of it out. If they are sold out, don't fear, my friends. There's another opportunity. July 26th is Back Together Saturday. It's at Nissan Stadium. It's free to the public. Just go online, TennesseeTitans.com. Claim your tickets there. We hope to see you over at Nissan Stadium. That practice is always so much fun. There's a lot of different things going on. Fun for the whole family. So come on out to Nissan Stadium. We would love to see you there on July 26th. For Jim Wyatt, I'm Amie Wells, and this has been the OTP.